Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Cold Steel Engage. I know I'm super late to the game. I handled a knife with the Atlas lock a long time ago. It was I think it was the Mayhem. It was gigantic, right? And I thought this would be awesome if it was on like a smaller knife, and everybody kept telling me, you got to check out the Engage. Well, here months, like months later, after everybody has already looked at this knife and reviewed it, I finally got my hands on it. Now, this is a more expensive special edition version of the knife. This one is in XHP, and it has the cool carbon fiber scales. This is the most expensive one to my knowledge, unless maybe they make a titanium one or something. But the standard premium version of this knife in S35VN comes in much less expensive at about $165 to $170. They even have slightly smaller and much smaller budget versions, one right about 50 or 60 and one right about 77. In any case, all of the different versions of this knife I will link down in the description, because overall I think that some version of this knife is going to appeal to most people, definitely. So I'll link it down below. You guys can check them out if you want to. It does really help my channel when you use those links, but that's entirely up to you. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. What is the Atlas lock? Instead of going into some lengthy, explanation, I'm going to show you a picture of exactly how this operates, right? There's a dual pin system, and then you have that sort of tab that locks underneath that slot in the blade that's carved out. If you've ever seen a picture of what the triad lock looks like, which is what we saw with a lot of still to this day, lots of Cold Steel knives, right? The Demco triad lock. This is like Cold Steel's new. It's like their version of the Shark lock, right? It's one lock in a sea of locks that we have right now, and that we are sure to continue to see as time progresses, where you actuate the lock from back here, and there's a coil spring, making the locking system and the spring reliability substantially better than something like the Axis lock or crossbar locks, right, that rely on the bar and the tang, which is plenty strong, but also Omega springs. This is a ridiculously strong system, arguably the same strength, some claim more strength, versus locks like the Triad lock and the Shark lock. I would say it doesn't really matter, because at this point, the locking system is so strong that you will break every other part of the knife before you manage to break or even disengage that locking system when you don't want to, right? So yeah, it is hyper strong, 100%. I never had an issue with it while I was carrying it, but I didn't take this thing out and abuse it, because I don't think you should do that to your knives. So there we go. Let's go ahead and measure this thing. So the overall length of the Engage is coming in at about 8.2, maybe 8 1/8. Let's do blade length, 3.5 inches, cutting edge, about 3 1/8. Let's do some size comparisons. Any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others. So up against the AD10 from Cold Steel and the AD20.5 from Demco. You can see here, it still has that Cold Steel look. This does not feel like a dainty knife. This feels like a big, robust, but serious tool. Cold Steel makes a lot of crazy stuff, and it's undoubtedly durable. It's undoubtedly capable. It's just a lot of it is way too big to, really be practical for EDC. Now, you carry what you want. You put a smile on your face. It's your money. Do whatever you want. I get it. Big knives are fun. Overbuilt knives are fun, right? The biggest wieldy knife that I prefer to carry is this AD10. So you can see here, it's not quite as big, not quite as robust, but in my opinion, that's better. It's more preferable to something like the AD10. Definitely larger than the AD20.5, and this part of the knife really sticks out, which is curiously not present on the less expensive versions of the knife. Or, well, it is present, it just looks different, which is odd. I kept looking for something to indicate that they were entirely different models, and they kind of are and kind of aren't, but it's probably a model that I need to check out separate from this one. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. It is very similar to the size of the PM2, but I think it's got just maybe a hair more cutting edge. Not a lot more. Definitely bigger than the Spyderco Para 3. And then finally, let's put it up against the Benchmade Group Two-Liner, in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. How's the action? That's the million-dollar question, right? We love the Shark Lock, and we love the Super Lock, and they're super organic to engage with, right? This knife is called the Engage. So is it convenient? Is it easy to engage with? Well, I think if I had never handled the Shark Lock or the Super Lock, I would have thought that this was like the next big best thing. I would have been pooping my pants over this, because it's super cool to be able to actuate a lock on the spine without having to do this. Nothing against the Triad Lock, but that's just too slow, right? So, yes, it works and you can adapt to it. It's a little bit more scary than manipulating something like the Shark Lock, right? This is in a much more organic position, especially when you're considering where, if you hold the knife like me, it's thumb and middle finger that's stabilizing the knife, and then the manipulation of the lock is the index finger. This is a lot more comfortable than this, which is much bigger. So I'm stabilizing with my thumb, and I'm having to stabilize with my index finger down here and reach much further down the back of the knife with my index finger, which I have to think about a little bit more. When I go to disengage it, I'm like, okay, position properly, get my index finger in the right spot, pull it down, and whip it close. Not a big deal. Definitely not quite as organic and convenient as the Shark Lock. It's also a little more scary because I don't feel quite as secure on the knife while I'm disengaging it, and it's a bigger blade. So if my index finger is positioned just a little bit too into the cutting path, then that CTS, in this case, CTS XHP blade is coming down on my finger. I have not cut myself. It's just not quite as comfortable as I want it to be. I want the whole locking system to just be moved up higher, which is probably not capable. You can see the two pins up here. They'd have to work around those, right? And get the whole switch to just be moved. They could probably do it. They have it back here. Not a big deal. It's very comfortable. Actually, engaging with it is comfortable. It's just not in an optimized position. Also, the thumb studs, I hate these thumb studs. It's 3 steps and then flat. It's just not comfortable. Like, dome it off. Let me see. What's a good example? So, the thumb studs on this guy right at the top, it's flat, but there's a much more comfortable bevel there on these. And even better, this is like the same thing that they have on the 8010. It's just like a hard 90-degree angle. The thumb studs on the Ontario Rat 1 and 2 are absolutely beautiful. These are just much more comfortable, that dome top. This just isn't my favorite type of thumb stud to engage with. Wheeling it out, you're fine, but if you like to flick it out, it's just a couple of flicks and you're going to be, yeesh, man, that's going to dig into your thumb a little bit, you know? Not that big of a deal. It does work, and it is locking up reliably. That is a hardcore lockout for sure. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's a little thick, not crazy, right? Something like the 8010. The 8010 is definitely a little thicker. I know that these are not, factory scales. I think they're actually slightly thinner than factory scales, so this is going to be much thinner than the factory Cold Steel 8010. It still somehow feels like a really big knife. Carry profile, length and height, it's going to be this way. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3 is very tall. Actually, slightly taller than the PM2, and for a consistent length. So, yeah, you'll notice it. It's not like, I can't carry this knife, it's too big. Like, yeah, if you're wearing dress pants, yeah, too big for that, right? In jeans, it'll be okay. Like work pants, cargo shorts, stuff like that, it'll be okay. It's big, though. You'll notice it, for sure. Weight. Now, this is going to vary quite a bit depending on which version of this you pick up. Like I said, this is a special edition version in carbon fiber and CTS XHP, which is what Cold Steel used to use on everything. Now they don't use it, and then they've brought the steel back for some special edition stuff. So there's a G10 version in S35EN. There's a slightly smaller version in G10 and AUS10A. And then there's an even smaller version that's also in G10 and AUS10A, or possibly injection mold plastic. But this version, probably going to be one of the heaviest, 6.2 ounces. The liners underneath, to my knowledge, are steel. And I say that let's try it from this way. Yeah, they definitely are. I say that because the liners on something like the 8010, if you didn't know, are actually aluminum from the factory. And then a lot of the steel fortification is with the Triad-Lock itself. So this actually has a steel locking system and steel liners, and then the carbon fiber, the XHP, right? So 6.2 ounces, not absolutely insane, but definitely on the heavier side by most standards for an EDC folding knife. Let's go ahead and measure the blade stock. I'm going to guess that's at least 145. Yeah, okay, 148 thousandths. That's about what I expected. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. I bet you that pivot is a T10. Yes, the pivot's a T10. And unfortunately, the rest of these screws are T6, which is so weird. Cold Steel, or the company that took over Cold Steel. Guys, for new models, T8 plus, please. Stop screwing around with T6 screws, especially on arguably some of the best knives in terms of cost to durability ratio. Cold Steel still has the cake there, right? Why are you guys making us deal with T6? Don't do that. I mean, most of the time you're not going to have to take apart your Cold Steel knife, but come on, T8 or bigger. It's just, I'm not saying that, T6 are always going to strip. I'm just saying you're less likely to have to mess with that with a T8 bit and a T8 fastener, or larger. Go bigger. T10 across the board. You already have a T10 pivot, common Cold Steel pivot, right? Let's go T10 across the board. But if you want to take this thing apart, there's a coil spring in there. It won't be super hard to take it apart and put back together. Just be aware of the coil spring, have a place to put your hardware, and obviously have the right tools for the job. You'll be good to go. Okay, time for the meat and potatoes. This is an extremely capable knife, and I was really hoping that what this knife would end up being was like the quintessential go-to EDC hard use all the way around. I was really hoping. I didn't really think that it would get there, but that's what I kind of wanted it to be, especially considering it's made by Cold Steel. So these are going to be made in Taiwan, and that makes the price lower than a lot of their American competition, right? That's part of the reason that people like Cold Steel knives so much. They kind of capture that tactical, hardcore, that whole idea without being too overboard with their EDC size stuff. Like, they definitely go overboard with other things, but I'm not talking like the gas station, tactical, all that crap. Like, these are real, serious, hardcore knives, utilizing anywhere from good to premium materials. The locking systems are amazing. This new Atlas lock, I still like it, I think, more than the Triad-Lock. I think it's a little more convenient, but I thought for sure that this would be a lot more organic to engage with. And it's okay. It's not quite as good as I'd hoped. This big protruding area right here, which is curiously really the most prominent on the more expensive versions. On the less expensive versions, it's like flatter. Why is this out here? I mean, do we need that much of a guard? Do we need that much of like this trigger backup lock-in? I don't think so, right? I think you could have slightly enlarged the sharpening choil, given that the thumb stud is pretty much right there. Like, just make it slightly bigger and knock this down, right? Even the 8010 is still a little bit like, whoa, but the choke up spots on a lot of this stuff don't need to be. I'll give a good example. On my knife that I designed, this is prototype 1, and it has this forward area, which is an area that I found appealing based on Strider and Spyderco and Demco knives for sure, right? Hinderer knives. But this prototype 1, on my prototype, I said this area right here is too pronounced. We need to pull it back. On my V3 prototype, which I only have the plastic model, it ended up looking like this, which is far more comfortable. Oh my gosh. If I want to back up and away from the blade, I can without sacrificing the feeling of being safely locked into the knife. This is annoying. This is so crazy. Why? I can't imagine a position where I'm going to need to be pulling back with my index finger, right? It's just too much. I get what they're trying to do, and I do feel locked in. I feel safe, but this is just unnecessary. Like, it makes me want to literally just shave this off, and I think it would be fine. Like, you would have this big area of the knife sticking out here. Maybe that's why they did it, so that this big hook thing that engages with the Atlas lock wasn't so pronounced. But it just feels ridiculous. So honestly, I think the way that the less expensive one looks and probably how it feels is just more organic. It's easier to look at and probably more friendly on the fingers. This is a very awkward, just elongated trigger thing. It makes the whole knife look like a disgruntled rhinoceros, like a small, angry, like the rhino that's like in the group, and he's fully grown. He's not going to get any bigger. He's kind of the run to the pack, right? I got a whole backstory for this guy. He's just mad all the time. He's not as big. He's not as fast. The ladies don't look at him quite as much, but hey, gosh darn it, he's capable. He wants to be noticed, right? That's what this looks like to me. It's a temperamental, small adult rhinoceros. That's what it makes me think of. So yeah, that area is weird. How comfortable is it in the standard grip? It's pretty good. Something that I really like about this knife is that whoever decided what the clip should be on this, I think was smart. And was like, yeah, they're probably like me. They don't want the bill of the clip going up and into the palm of your hand. It's actually really comfortable. These are not contoured, but they're heavily chamfered at the edge a lot of the same way that the Shaman is. And if you've ever handled the Spyderco Shaman, yes, I know I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. That is 100% to bother you. So don't let me troll you. But yeah, it makes me think of that. So that combined with a pocket clip is pretty nice. I don't like these handles that come around. It's the same thing with Demco knives, right? I don't like these handles that come around like this and lock you in. Just shave this off and let me decide how I want to hold it, right? Because this back area of the knife, you just lose that ergonomically because it has this big mountaintop that you have to deal with, right? In some specific scenarios, you might want that little stopper to really lock you in. I feel like the vast majority of the time, right? I mean, like 1 in 10,000 people is going to absolutely need that, right? I don't know, right? I guess it depends on what you're doing. For me personally, I don't need it. I find that the open back end, as long as the ergonomic lines are good enough, like I'm still plenty locked in. I'm not going to drop or lose the knife. So I don't love that. And this choke up spot is roomy, but this is so unnecessary. It is so unnecessary. The other thing, every now and then while I'm gripping this, I feel this like itch on the inside of my fingers, and I realize that they're getting caught coming off of this area right here. The liners, the ledges are really sharp. So that's slightly annoying. Everything else there, I think if it seems like I'm being overly critical, it's because I had really high expectations for this. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, it is plenty comfortable. And the other nice thing is because we have an ambidextrous locking system with the Atlas lock, right? It's one of the great things about locking systems like this. One-hand manipulation, reliability, strength, and ambidextrous in nature. So accommodating for left-handed people who get the shaft literally 90% of the time when they're looking at knives. So it is able to be mounted optimally for left and right-handed people, and that's great. The blade shape is a fairly classic clip point blade, nothing too crazy. They did scream the word engage at you nice and big, so I think that's a little bit stupid. We don't need to have the name of the knife on the knife, right? They also have a number here, which I also hate. I can't stand that. And then the Cold Steel branding in general is a little bit in your face, right? I think just Cold Steel, much smaller, and XHP over here, you could put Taiwan down there, that's fine, and then just leave everything else off the front of the knife. It's just too much, right? The blade itself is not thin, but it's not overly thick, right? It's a good utilitarian blade. I didn't find any issue with it. This is CTS XHP. Admittedly, I don't know how they're heat treating it, but Cold Steel's track record with heat treatment has been generally pretty good. These knives are definitely not knives that people baby. If you are discovering Cold Steel for the first time or discovering that knives get more expensive than $50 for the first time and you're looking at the price of this and you're thinking, oh my God, certainly nobody uses those knives. Those are so nice that they got to be mounted on a wall. Hardly. This is still definitely user territory. Cold Steel has so much customer data from people EDCing these knives, not just EDCing them, but beating them into the ground. They are tested thoroughly tested. Even this new Atlas lock has tons of customer feedback. These are incredibly durable knives. They generally perform pretty well, especially, if you're going to take them out and really use them hard in an outdoor hard use environment, right? So, they're going to function. They're not going to be the most precision slicers in the world. And I still don't, despite how tough they are, you still don't need to be prying or doing anything that's going to snap the tip on your knife. Right? If you're going to do that, you want a much softer steel. You want a fixed blade that's got a much more robust tip, right? This is still going to be on the harder side and still going to be better used for continuous heavy cutting tasks where the pressure's on the blade and not like the tip jamming into steel drums for some reason, which is a test that's always referenced by people on TikTok. But why do you guys ask me to do that? What does that prove? Can you stab it through a steel drum? All my knives can go through a street. That's stupid. Why are you doing that? It's a knife. That's why. Is it part of your occupation? Like, I go to work every day and I poke holes in a bunch of drums and I come and clock out and I come home. My wife's like, how was it? My wife, she sounds just like me. So how was your day at the drum poking factory? I was poked a lot of drums today. It's just dumb. That's not a test. So anyways, sorry, that was a big departure from the knife review. But yeah, it's a good, robust blade shape. XHP is a lot like a stainless D2. So a decent balance, but definitely still should be used well within the parameters of normal knife tasks, right? It's the locking system that makes the knife durable. Anyways, little backspacer back here, nothing special. The jimping or the actual texturing on the Atlas lock is okay. It's pretty catchy. I've never slipped off of it, honestly. I guess I'm just used to the texturing on the back. It's probably more so the angle of the back of the shark lock that makes this easier to engage. This one is slanted this way, so it's okay, right? Ergonomically, I don't notice the Atlas lock at all, which I guess is a benefit to the position of the Atlas lock versus something like the shark lock. This is much easier to engage with, but you do feel it a little more when you're choked up. I've not really ever, some people tell me that really bothers them. I've not really noticed it. But this one, because of its position and especially the angle of the point where you're supposed to engage with, not going to bother your hand, right? So there's a benefit there for sure. Lockup. Honestly, like, I know people are always like, prove it, but it's been proven. The Atlas lock has been thoroughly tested on YouTube. You just barely have to try to look up the lock strength tests for this lock, right? It's incredibly strong. The amount of force that you would need to apply to this would represent no normal activity that you would conceivably do with a knife, right? So it's going to hold up, right? It's also not likely to disengage. I think it's almost impossible to disengage during normal use. You have to, intentionally disengage that lock bar in order to get it to disengage, right? Absolutely solid, not a hint of movement. There's no lock stick, there's no pivot lash. Smooth in here, and then it's kind of that event horizon, where it's got kind of a lump and it rolls around and that pulls it down in here. There's not a lot holding it in place. You can definitely like whip it out if you want to, if you want to, like that guy, everybody's always got like a Jerry from Parts who doesn't know that knives can be deployed with no wrist, right? He's still like, yeah, right? Still doing that and trying to impress people. You can also do that with the shark lock, right? And you can also do it with most of your, your Axis lock style knives. I have a much harder time doing that with the Triad lock, but I can absolutely do it, right? So if you're going to tell me that that's a deal breaker and you miss old cold steel knives, I can do it with an 80-10. I just have to work a little harder at it. I don't think that's going to be much of a problem, though. You'd really have to be doing some pretty serious parkour to get that to whip out, Blade centering is nice and center. So the base price of the premium one, which is G10 and S35VN, is $165. Do I feel like that's a fair price for the tool that you're getting? Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's a little awkward. I don't understand this area, right? The liners are a little bit sharp. I don't like the thumb studs. But at the end of the day, like, if you want, if you want a really, really serious cutting tool and you don't want to, you just want it to be slightly more convenient than something like the Tri-Block, you like these newer style spring-loaded back locks, right? The Cold Steel Engage is a good knife. It can definitely be refined. Like what they have here is the foundation for something truly excellent. And it's good as it is. It's good. It's got some corkiness to it. Not necessarily anything that's a deal breaker, just some slightly annoying things. But honestly, I would just buy the less expensive one. I know you guys are like, oh, but it's OS 10A for $77. What is OS 10A? It's somewhere between 440C, which is not a bad steel. It's just not special anymore, and 154CM. 154CM was designed as to reduce it to something simple. It's supposed to be like kind of an evolution of 440C, and OS 10A falls somewhere in that territory. Is it gonna work? Like if you're gonna really beat on your knife, like this is the knife that you buy if you're gonna beat on it. Is OS 10A gonna work? Oh yeah. It doesn't, at that point, if you really beat on it, almost doesn't matter what the steel is. You're going to be sharpening it up at the end of the day. Obviously, there's benefits to more premium steels or more better suited steels for the environment, but I don't think OS 10A is a bad choice. I just think ergonomically it'll be a little more comfortable than this right here, and I think to get the best of what this knife offers, you don't necessarily need premium materials, right? So this is cool. If you want S35EN, spend the $165. If you want XHP and carbon fiber, spend the $245 on this guy. Generally speaking, though, this is a recommendable knife. I would just really like to see it evolve. I think it's got some things that just need to be altered, but it is good, right? If you already own this knife, if you're watching this video for reaffirmation, if you made a good purchase, yeah, you made a good purchase, but I bet you're annoyed with some of the same stuff that I'm annoyed with. So very cool. Thanks so much to Blade HQ for supplying this knife for review. The links will go to Blade HQ products. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do of course have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.